Back in the 80s, when I was growing up, our family computer was a bare-bones Macintosh SE. No hard drive, but it did have 2 disk drives. Unfortunately, these weren't super drives, so they could only use a single-sided or double-sided double-density floppy disks. If you don't know what that means, it means they didn't hold a lot of stuff. They held roughly half as much data as the much more common high-density disks. That was fine though. Most of the games we had were just shareware stuff anyways, and those games were never really big, so they'd load fast and you could fit several of them on a single 800K floppy disk. The only problem was that the disks were pretty expensive back then, and it seems we never had enough of them. We did eventually get an external hard drive, which held a whopping 20 megabytes, but for most of the time we just used floppies. So much so that we'd use floppies until that inevitable day came when we get read or write errors and the disk would become a ninja star. Disks were unreliable, and sometimes we'd lose our Mac Paint masterpieces. And even games. It really sucks losing games as a kid. I remember a couple of games that really hurt to lose were Crystal Raider, which was like an early version of Crystal Quest. It didn't control as well though. And another game called Continuum, which I thought was amazing during the little time I had it. It's so awesome these days to be able to easily go back and play games we forgot about or thought we'd never see again. Continuum was one of those games for me when I ran across it a few years ago. I was instantly pulled back into it and had a great time. I've been meaning to share this game with you for a long time now, so let's check it out. The development of this game started in 1984 when Randy Wilson wrote a game called Gravity Well for the original Macintosh. According to a blog by a brother of the author, Brian Wilson, the game was licensed to Broderbund and a relatively poor port was made to the Commodore 64. But for whatever reason, it wasn't released on Macintosh. A couple of years later, the Wilson brothers were able to get out of the contract with Broderbund and released it as Continuum on the Mac. It wasn't released commercially, and not shareware, but rather beerware. If you enjoyed the game and wanted to keep it after 15 days, you were encouraged to send in a case of fine beer. If you were too young to buy beer, you could send in money, promises of your firstborn children, or foot rubs administered with suitably exotic oils. No thanks, dudes. Continuum is an arcade-style game where you pilot a ship through maze-like levels while fighting the pull of gravity. Some of the walls you can bump into, but most of them you can't. You'll violently explode if you touch almost anything in this game, so good control over your ship and fuel are required to get to the later levels. If you've ever played the 1982 Atari game Gravitar, you'll probably think this game looks a bit similar. Well, I do, but I think it's safe to say that Continuum was at least inspired by Gravitar. The objective of the game is to seek out and destroy enemy bases while picking up and managing fuel. It's a really simple game overall, but believe me when I say it's challenging. Gravity is one of the main threats here as it can come from different sources and attract or repel your ship. In the game pull-down menu, there's a playing tips section which starts with avoid the walls first, kill things second, and that's a really helpful tip. Hitting walls is the #1 way that I die in this game, so it's always important to know where you are and use good judgment with the amount of gravity that's pulling on you. As I said, the main objective is to take out all the stationary enemy bases on each level, or planet, to progress to the next. Here's a list of all the bad guys you'll run into in this game. They are somewhat mostly the same, with various differences such as the rate of fire and range. Such as these guys, which have a limited firing range. Or these keycap looking guys, which will rotate and aim towards you and shoot. These satellite dishes can only be destroyed at the base, and they're kinda tricky. This gravity machine can be set to attract you in or repel you away. And then there's this guy, who just kinda sits there. Fuel can be found in these Amiga looking beach balls, and what you do to pick it up is fly over it and hit your shield button. Yep, that's right, you have shields in this game too. The shield is vital when you start to get deep into the game. It won't protect you against hitting walls, but it will block enemy shots, and there are plenty of places in the game where you'll be using it a lot. Which is a problem because the shields use just as much fuel as the thrusters. It's important to pick up all the fuel you come across. There are 60 planets in total in the galaxy that the game comes with. As you'd expect, it starts off pretty easy, and by the end it's really an insane difficulty. There is a map in this game which shows the overall layout of the planet, along with the location of enemies and fuel, and it helps a lot to get through the maze-like planets. If it's still too difficult, there are some ways to get through the game a bit easier, such as a documented cheats, Command E for extra ships, or Command U to move to the next planet. You can also use the Start At menu option to start a new game on different planets. Using these cheats will forfeit your attempt at a high score. I'm a little back and forth on the graphics in this game. At first glance, they look pretty good and some even look professional, but that's because some of the enemy designs actually are professional. According to Brian Wilson's blog post, they did get some art from the artist at Broderbund and incorporated some of it into the final release of Continuum. While it does look good, after playing the game for a while, you start to notice some inconsistencies in the isometric perspective. It's nothing major and it doesn't really throw you off though. Being that it's a game designed for compact Macs, there is no music. There are sound effects that sound really close to the Gravatar arcade game, and they do fit well in this game. You probably don't want to have the volume up too loud though, as they are by default nice and loud. So yes, this is Continuum, a Gravatar style game for early Mac. Would you believe me if I told you there was more to this game too? Well, you'd be wrong if you didn't. This game features a level editor that makes it really easy to build your own galaxies. There's a lot to this, yet it keeps it easy as drag and drop to build planets. There are some more advanced settings that you can play around with too. It's really neat. The only problem I had with it was that I wasn't able to figure out how to add some of the later enemy bases. There's gotta be a way, but I just haven't found out yet. This is a good game. I would recommend you check this out if it looks fun to you. Nostalgia has probably twisted my perception of a few games before, but I've spent a lot of time with this game for the past few weeks and honestly do think that there's a lot of fun to be had here. The way I'm enjoying it is with my gamepad, using the default set for it in the Mac gamepad control panel. It was actually a bit harder to control using the gamepad at first, but I eventually got a little better with it. In my opinion, this game is commercial quality, and it makes me wonder why the Wilson brothers didn't sell it commercially. Probably had something to do with the terms from Broderbund, but I guess releasing it as beerware is good too. I guess it worked for them too, which is cool. They got some sent in, and they even got a bottle of sake from someone in Japan. That's nice. If you've got an old compact Mac, you need to have a copy of this game on there. It's challenging, entertaining, and it still holds up just fine today. It's a great game. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button. It'll really help me out. If you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you're subscribed. I've got more general gaming content to come in the future. Seems like it's taking a while, but I'm just not there yet. Soon though. I'm working on making room on my schedule. I'm working on making room on my schedule, but I'm working on making room on my schedule. That's just how it goes sometimes. I'm working on making room on my schedule. I'm working on making. That's just how it goes sometimes. Subscribe. That's just how it goes sometimes. I'm working on making. That's just how it goes sometimes. I'm working on making. That's just how it goes sometimes. Okay, bye. Okay, bye.